What happens when a guy from the city accidentally contacts a guy from the country? It's not what you think. They strike up a conversation and same difference is created. JD and Kory talk the whole gamut of life as they each see it through the prism of race. One is a 6'4" black man and one is a 5'4" white man. Tune in and find out which is which. Agree or disagree, they will make you think, strike emotional chords, and more. Stick around. You might just learn something. Welcome to Same Difference with your hosts, JD and Kory. We're sharing our stories and how our stories impacted our approach to life. We take our perspectives into having dialogue about real life topics.
All right, and we're back. Episode 2, How We Are Raised.
Oh, yes.
And so it's a great, I think it's a great question for us in this platform, because this is really the essence of what's bringing you and I together. Is how we were raised overall in the environment and the culture that we were raised in, but specifically, our parents each made choices that put us in the position and how they raised us. And that's what this episode will be about today, is how did our parents in our environment that we were raised in, how did they choose to raise us in their house? And so I want to just ask you, do you know why your parents chose Iowa City, and what they were going through in their mind as far as, knowing that it was a predominantly white area and they were raising black children there?
Well, okay, obviously they knew they were raising black children.
Right.
But I always was fascinated by the idea that my mom and dad were from rural southern Illinois, the very southern tip. My dad was in a town called Olmsted, and my mother was in a town called Mound City, or Mound City. And they met down there, and they looked and said, there's not enough opportunity for us down here. Let's go north and west. So they end up moving to Iowa City, Iowa, where the University of Iowa is. Dad is getting into the physical therapy department here. And he was one of 2 black physical therapists way back in the day. So there had been a tradition of black people living in Iowa City. It was small, and there were still racial discriminations here. A lot of the black folk had to live off campus, and a lot of the amenities that you would normally have access to, you didn't have access to. You couldn't get a haircut in Iowa City if you had black hair. You had to go to Cedar Rapids, which was half an hour car ride, in order to get anyone who would do your hair work, to visit a black barber shop. My dad and one of his best friends here, who was a pastor at my church, First Presbyterian Church. His name was Jack Zerwas. Dad and Reverend Zerwas petitioned the Iowa City government to allow, to desegregate the barber shops so that black folks could get their hair cut in Iowa City. This was before we were all doing our hair around a coffee table in our apartment. Long before that. And we at the time experienced, this was before I was born. I'm just telling you the tales of what had been told to me.
Okay.
There was reluctance to interact. People viewed us with suspicion because we were black, obviously. And it's the 50s too.
Right.
And those conversations are hard to hear. Now, I grew up in Iowa City, and we were always taught that we couldn't act like like our white peers. My siblings and I couldn't behave the same way. And it wasn't explicitly stated until we got a little bit older, but as children, we were supposed to be seen and not heard and not seen too much at all.
Right. Yeah.
We were supposed to entertain ourselves, so there were books. We were expected to be excellent at everything we did. We were told on any
This
number
was
of
expected by the
mom and dad.
community, your mom and dad. Got it.
The other thing was you will not embarrass us in
Yes.
you could not act like our peers. Our peers a lot of times would sass back at their parents. We couldn't do that.
Right.
Yell at the parents, curse at the parents. Heck no. When I saw some of my white classmates do that, I'm thinking, "Oh my god, you're going to be dead tomorrow."
Mhm.
you that that didn't happen. There were some different cultural expectations. We were supposed to be excellent at
Right.
everything we did. Didn't matter whether it was the first time, didn't matter whether we had been at it um, for 10 years. We were expected to be excellent at it. And in that way, mom and dad toughened us up so that that was an expectation. We were expected to be groomed neatly. We may not have had the nicest, newest clothes. I'll say it like that, the newest clothes, but the clothes we did have, we were supposed to look groomed in them. There was no excuse for us to be running around nappy headed, crust in the corners of our mouths, our eyes, or anything. We were supposed to be groomed and we were supposed to be neat.
Making me check my mouth right now.
And that expectation was such that it carries on. It carries on with me and everything that I do, right? Everything that I do. If I am if I'm going to go on stage, I make sure that all the grooming is taken care of. If my shirts are pressed, my shoes are shined, all of that just drilled into you. People may have their first opinion of you, their first impression of you, but you're not going, and they may dislike you, but you're not going to give them fodder for that. Oh my gosh, look, he's just looks like, as I said, something the cat drug in and the dog wouldn't play with. We're
Right.
not going to have that. Table manners. We were taught to be almost surgical with our utensils and being around older people all the time. Again, seen, not heard, not seen too much. And it was a great privilege to be elevated from the children's table to the adults' table. Because when you finally got to the adults' table, it was considered that you had something to say. Now, that didn't mean you were going to get called on, but you might have an opportunity to speak
Right.
well, speak clearly, speak with the idea that you have something to say that you've thought about. Tough standards sometimes as children,
Yeah.
sometimes real tough standards.
I want to dig into that a little deeper because one of the most eye-opening lessons in my life was talking about the power to define and how during the 60s and this fight for freedom with civil rights and whatnot, freedom was still defined as really free to be an assimilation into white culture. It was
Yes.
not free to wear, to learn about your African heritage or your indigenous heritage. It was not free to dress and according to how your culture, as you learned about it, would be. It was free to participate in a very structured white cultural definition. And was that ever discussed with you, or did you ever have a sense about that?
Yeah, I will say yes and all those things. We were taught about Black culture. Um, I remember as a child how important it was whenever I saw Black people on television. So we're talking the late 60s, early 70s as a child. It was years before, decades before the Cosby Show came on, right? And anytime there would be a black person on television, we'd be shocked and amazed, and it was something to behold. When it comes down to being the assimilated version, yes, that we were taught to assimilate, and at the same time, at home, we were also getting taught Black history. So there was agents of socialization like Ebony and Jet Magazine every week, Ebony
Right,
Jr., which was really cool as well for a child perspective on what race in America was. Ebony Magazine, and when you graduate to this. And what was confounding to me was a couple of things. The music at the back of Jet magazine, they'd have um their top 25 albums, the weekly and the singles. And
right,
I would look at that and I would try to figure out, I've never heard half of these songs, if not more. So there was this awareness that there was something greater and bigger elsewhere. And also in Ebony, you would see ads for Black fashion.
right.
I wasn't seeing that in Iowa City.
Yeah,
I would see pictures of Black models with big afros. And my parents, in that respect, were conservative with regard to grooming. So it was always short hair for me. I never could have a globe.
right.
And that was a thing. That was a genuine thing to understand that in some respects I'm window shopping at culture. I can see it, I have some access to it, but I'm not able to go in and be in that space.
Very interesting. I mean, description of that, I wouldn't have thought of it that way. But yeah. So
Yes.
and so as this was going on, was there lessons being taught to you as to why you wouldn't be able to have those things that you're seeing? Like I remember being taught, like, you're not going to get the Jordans because I'm not paying that much for some damn shoes. You must be crazy. But
Oh,
that was a
yes,
different.
Jordans came well after,
Right.
Jordans were late in my late teens.
Sure. I'm
So
just
that was more
comparing the window
right.
shopping response. So, were you ever taught about why you weren't able to, or what did you even want an afro? I guess even or
Oh, I
so
did.
anything.
I did. We would see excerpts of things like from Ebony magazine. I might see Jim Kelly featured from Enter the Dragon, and Jim Kelly's got this cool sweatsuit, and he got that cool sculpted afro. That man was cold, and I wanted to be like him because he looked cool and he looked like me. That was huge. I believe Enter the Dragon came into town when I was a little kid, and my parents weren't gonna let me go see that. They weren't gonna let me go see that. I got a chance to see all the cute Disney movies that were
Right.
like, oh, Strongest Kid in the World, the Benji movies, Pippi Longstockings, and again, a lot of cultural entertainment that was white oriented, definitely not black oriented. So I'm aware that I am different at some point or another, but at another point, I just kind of want to fit in and be. So you're aware that you're
Right.
different, but you want to fit
Sure.
in regardless. And so you try to fit your square peg into a round hole until you realize that that's too painful to maintain. And then you start to seek out other people who are closer to you. And with the university around, I did see black people, and seeing black people in Iowa, it's the head nod, the
Yeah.
recognition. I see you. We're in a
Right.
similar place. We're in a similar state. And if you don't get the acknowledging head nod back, you do it again, like, hey, you didn't see me. And sometimes you run into that and you're like, okay, that person may not be down. I don't know what their problem is. Let's see other things. It was entertainment wise. I ended up going to the public library a lot because I love to read. And because I love to read and there were tons of books there, it was a safe place. So we can talk about my nerd streak, but it was a place where I never ever felt that I didn't fit in ever. Always felt safe and accepted at the public library. My mom and dad would do their business downtown. Mom would give me $1 and she'd go take care of all of her errands and I'd stay at the public library. She knew full well I would never leave with anybody other than her because one, I'm in a place with a ton of books, and as long as there were books there, you couldn't pull me away with wild horses. Buildings on fire, I'll wait until mom gets here. I'll give you $500 to go with me, young man, and a strange person. Nah, I'm good. I got $1. I can get a nutty buddy and some Welch's grape juice. I'm straight. And
Right.
the folks at the public library knew me and they cared for me. They cared about me too. And that was something that is near and dear to my heart. Uh,
Mm.
the librarian there, her name, or the children's librarian there, was a woman named Hazel Westgate. And she said it was her policy if you could print your name on a card, you were old enough to get that card. Boom, had a library card. I was gone from Iowa City from 1991 to 2006.
Mm.
I come back in '06. Some of the same librarians that were there when I was a little kid were there and they recognized me.
Right.
I'm a grown man and they recognized me. And two things happened. They asked about me, how I was doing, and then they asked me, what have you been reading? And then they offered me recommendations.
Right.
And as a place that's near and dear to my heart, it's always going to be a library. Always. It will always be a
Right.
library because if they're doing their job correctly, there's no discrimination there. They're all about educating you to be better. As you were talking about your best version of yourself, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm nerding out on that, but this is
No, but
a near and dear place to my heart. And
sure.
I go to my public library regularly. Mom and dad were supporters and patrons. They took us to the library. It's a habit. My kids, I used to take my kids to the library at least once a week. Check out a big stack of books. You go through those books. You're responsible for them. We're going to go back again next Saturday or next Thursday, whenever. And I wanted them to be comfortable and excited about their ability to read.
Mhm.
And anytime I hear of barring a learning disability, anytime I hear about a person of color saying, I don't want to read, I get upset. I'm like, this is please understand that 100 years ago, many of us, maybe 150 years ago, heck, 2 centuries ago, we weren't allowed to read.
Right.
And that's a value that mom and dad reinforced. Our house was full of books,
Mhm.
and my apartment full of books. When I send my kids gifts, a lot of times I send them books. And I can hear as they open up the package miles and miles away, I can hear them roll their eyes audibly. And like, oh geez, here he
Mhm.
goes again. That is important.
Right.
So I often ask my kids, when was the last time you went to the library? When was the last time you visited your public library? What are you reading? And that's something that was passed down. I come from generations of teachers, and the idea that we are constantly reading is something that I always try to reinforce. What are you reading? What did you learn today? And a lot of my kids are like, Dad, I'm not in college anymore. And I said, but that doesn't mean you can't be learning.
Right. So going back to that upbringing, what we're I'm hearing about the, you know, like strict rule of conduct and how you behave yourself. Was it was it ever taught to you about how to behave in public for safety purposes?
Um,
Um, to maintain so that you're not being judged? Was it
not
anything to do
explicitly. Not explicitly. Um, there was
like did
always
you talk? Was
not again, it was not explicitly, it was about how you conduct yourself around white people so that an Emmett Till doesn't happen.
right.
That was the cautionary tale. That was the talk before the talk.
Hmm.
Seen, not heard, and not seen too much.
Hmm.
Don't draw a whole lot of attention to yourself. Excel, be humble about it, and you might just make it through. But it was never the explicit talk like we have now. Never. It was it wasn't that the threat was coming from the police as explicitly. It was a threat that could come from any member of white society.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was and that was low level reinforced. And sometimes as I've gotten older, unraveling that thread and finding that heartbeat to that message and like, oh wow, whoa, that's a hard thing to confront at times. That the threat was from everywhere, and especially as a child, that was a hard thing to unravel. I'm like, oh my gosh. So here's an example. I used to deliver the Des Moines Register, which was the paper out of the capital of Iowa. And one time it was a Pulitzer winning independent newspaper. It's now been corporatized by Gannett, and it's lost a lot of its juice. But I used to deliver this paper when I was a little boy, and I knew my route really well. And between myself and my parents knowing being a part of the community, they knew everyone, almost everyone on the blocks. I mean, yeah, on the route. And then because I had to go and collect, I got to know people. And you deliver the newspapers, do all that, and you collect, and everything's cool. Well, there was once a young uh, paper boy out of Des Moines. His name was Johnny Gosh. Johnny was a Des Moines Register paper route paper boy. Disappeared. And with the readership of the Des Moines Register covering the entire state, this was a panic moment for all of us vulnerable paper boys.
Mm, mm.
Because now we don't know, one of us is gone. A couple years later, another young man is snatched. His name was Eugene Martin. My dad had died by then. And right around in that intervening time, there were the Atlanta child murders. And Atlanta's on the other side of the Mississippi. It's hundreds, if not 1,000 miles away. But my
Right.
mom cracked down. She embraced me more because I was her son. Now I'm full of what I think is testosterone, and I'm an early teen, and I think I'm the baddest thing on the planet.
Mm, mm.
And mom is trying to let me know you're not. You might be bigger than some, but there's people a lot bigger than you out there. I found that her at the time, I found her methods were really constrictive. I'm like, oh, geez, mom. I mean, nobody, nothing's going to happen to me here. I'm in Iowa City, this safe bubble. It's a college town. Everything's cool. And it wasn't until I got older and I had children of my own that I got to experience that fear. And now I understand why she was hanging on to me really tightly.
Yeah.
It makes sense that she was hanging on to me tightly.
Yeah. I I share that not coming into that from when I met Steven's mom. He was 6. Chevelle and I became a couple. I became dad, and every time he left, she was afraid. And my mom was too, but there was a different level of fear being a young black kid because of the way things were handled. If he went out with 3 boy in LA, this was LA, if he went out with 3 other black kids, they were considered a gang and not allowed to walk together in the mall.
Mhm, mhm,
Didn't matter how many white kids walked together, they weren't considered a gang.
right,
So if you're right, you're feeling like that it's a gang. When he went to take his ID picture for his state ID, he wanted to wear a T-shirt, and we wouldn't let him wear a T-shirt because you're going to be looked at. If the police grab your ID and they say, "Oh, you got a T-shirt on, you're a gang member." We don't need that first thought. He was like, "That's stupid. I can wear whatever I want." Yes, you should be able to. That's not how this works.
right,
And it wasn't, when I was a kid, I would have been just like him. That's some stupid shit. I'm gonna wear what the hell I want to,
right.
and my friends be able to wear what the hell they want to. And that's not how this works.
You're correct. I brought when as hoodies were starting to become because well, hoodies have been around for forever,
For
right?
forever.
But they weren't recognized as hoodies
Uh-huh.
until black folks started to wear them. Then
Right.
it's hoodies, and not only is it the hood that you're wearing, but
But it's the
the
neighborhood.
hood,
Right.
the neighborhood,
Right.
right? And you start to see, in some respects, gentrification of fashion.
Mm-hmm.
White folks wore this, black folks wore this. Black folks
Mm-hmm.
in running around, you going for bad, you pull the hoodie down over your eyes, you can't identify your face, suspicion. So I told my oldest son, I was like, dog, you can't be wearing hoodies. I I don't want anything to happen to you. Dad, nothing's gonna happen to me, nothing's gonna happen to me. And I said, it only takes once.
Only takes once.
And the problem was getting through to him that this isn't me being mean spirited. It's me trying to make sure that you come home in one piece.
It it is not my rule based on just me coming up with a rule. Right. It is exactly what you said. Me looking out for your ability to come home.
And children have a hard time understanding how much love there is because they can't, they have no frame of reference. They have no frame of
Right.
reference to love that much
We're born with innocence, and our job as parents is to protect that
and preserve.
innocence and preserve that innocence as long as it can be preserved. And yet, you have an understanding of the world trying to take that innocence away. And
Right.
so, part of it is that conflict of, yes, I'm protecting your innocence by not letting you just be innocently out there doing whatever you want to do, because that's not the society that we live in.
Right. And to amplify that point, it's you can't, and again, I hated to have having to parrot these words because I was there's that moment when you open up your mouth and your mama hops out, and
Hmm.
her voice and all of her
Yeah.
hops out of your mouth, and you're like, oh snap, here we go,
Yes.
here we
Right.
go. And I told Xavier this same thing. I was like, look, you cannot act like your peers. You cannot. If you do, I can't protect you the same way that mama protected me. Does it mean you're going to miss out on some fun? Yeah. But you've got the rest of your life to have that fun. The party that you're going to miss this weekend, you're going to be able to experience some parties that are going to be better than that at at a later junction in your life. Hard thing to hear, hard thing to say, but my whole day revolved around getting my kids home in one piece. And it's hard to explain until they start to see the world's inequities, and you just kind of hold them there and say, I'm with you. I'm with you. That's all I got. I'm with you.
Yeah. It, it's amazing on the flip side. My parents didn't have to think about that type of shit, right?
Oh, of
They
course
did
not.
they were forced to think about it. Matter of fact, because of my friends and their skin color and what we had to go through, that made them go, okay, I never had to think about that before, right? So my
Tell
friends, huh?
tell me about, because you're gonna tell your experience. I want to know what it's like to be the white kid in the hood, and
Uh-huh.
how you saw things next to your peers.
Well, I just want to finish this story. That one time my friends and I were at a hotel hanging out. One of their older brothers worked in the kitchen there. And so we would get to go to the pool, and by going to the pool, we'd meet other kids, high school, whatever, and we'd hang out. And we were hanging out past curfew. And the police ended up bringing us home. Now, they probably would not have brought us home had I not been my parents' son, right? Had my dad not worked around the corner, because this was where they grew up, which is a very white, wealthier area than where I grew up, which has some middle class to and whatnot, but also a lot more black folks. And so the police brought us home, and when they woke my parents up to tell us what was happening, they said there's no charges. And my mom went, "Oh, thank you," as if she thought they were like a taxi service and going to charge her, and gave her free charge. No, they were saying they weren't going to charge us with loitering, with right, with being out past curfew, with any of these things. She had never thought of these police ever charging her son. Now, I was arrested through high school probably 5 or 6 times. Nothing major. Sometimes it was traffic warrants. Sometimes it was my friends being chased at the grocery store, and I'm getting involved with my little white ass trying to stand up for them, and we all get shipped down. It was various times, but I didn't spend more than a night in jail, and usually my parents would come and get me, um, and get us, really. But they didn't have to think about that. They weren't even thinking about that when they said, I want to raise my children around black folks, right? The society was so much built for us
Mm-hmm.
that we don't have to think about society built against us.
Right.
And I had to learn constantly, at the risk of my friend's safety, often, that that's what's happened, because my parents didn't have to give me any talks about that.
Tell me
My
more
parents
about that. Yeah.
Right? My parents would give me talks about how society is screwed up, and that's how sometimes your friends are in situations of having less income in their household than us, and they'll give me that breakdown. Or, my father mainly was that one, or how the system of criminal justice was set up. but it was never a this is how you need to behave. And so I remember one night, I mean, so when Shondo and Jamel, there was a period. Shondo is one of, been my best friend since I was 4. Him and his older brother, Mike, were my best friends. We moved next to when I was 4. And uh, through Shondo, I met really every one of my other friends mainly. And Jamel lived in the neighborhood and we played tennis together. We played on the baseball team together. So summers we would play tennis in the tennis camp, go to baseball practice, ride our bikes into Clayton where my parents were raised, and play tennis at night, or walk all the way through Clayton, go to the movie theater, and then walk back. And it could be close to midnight when we're walking back, and the police would often stop us. Clayton police would stop us. And I remember the first time they stopped us and said, well, there was a break in at somebody's house. And, so we need to know where you're going and what you know about this. And we were like, we don't know anything about this. We're going home. What are you doing? But they held us and they kept pushing buttons. And I got so frustrated and tired, like, okay, dude, what if we help you find the people? And my friends went, no, we won't. And I was like, oh, shit.
You didn't know about snitches getting stitches?
Eddie Griffin. They're not here to help us. What am I doing? Like, and that's when I got the talk on the way home after after the police finally let us go from harassing us so much. Dude, you can't say that. These people aren't our friends. They're not here to protect us. You have to watch yourself. If we were wrongfully pulled over, my dad would let them, because they were all older than me, they got to drive my dad's car before I did. If the police pulled us over because there was black people driving this car, and it was not a fancy car, it was a minivan, I would get pissed. What are you pulling us over for? Why? It's my father's car. He says we could. I mean, they would call him sometimes at night, wake him up, and he would say, "What were they doing that you had to pull them over?" Well, then why would you not wait for me to say that the car was missing? What are you? You don't need to take that extra step. But as I'm getting angry, they're at risk.
Right, right,
I
right.
was never at risk. And part of me at that time of this young age is feeling like I'm standing up for them, right? Like I'm able to do this. I'm going to be the one to stand. That doesn't fucking matter. I'm putting them at risk.
Right, right.
Right? Like, yeah, okay, I look big and bad. I can get away with saying stuff that they couldn't, but I'm still the one at risk. Yeah. So had my father not been an attorney, which is a respectful job in the legal system,
Yeah.
well, who knows what
Oh,
would
yeah.
have what risk I would have been putting them in. And that was eye opening as I grew older. Like, yes, it was beautiful what my parents wanted to do in
Right.
raising me around black folks. It was beautiful that they welcomed my friends into their home the same way that my friends' families welcomed me into theirs. They didn't know what they were getting into, though.
All right. So I got a couple questions for you. When was the first time you ever felt fear? Like race-based fear. That whole idea that or the recognition that the system is neither designed to work for you or writ large that it was not designed for you at all.
Um, from a system standpoint, with me,
Yeah.
not until I was old enough for police outside of my neighborhood to know I was the white guy with the black friends.
Mm,
Um,
that sounds like a story. Ante up the goods, bruh.
they, they just would tell me like, you need different friends. Like what they sometimes would tell me that, and I was just dropping my friends off at at their work, and they would go, "What are you doing?" And they worked at a factory, and they were
Mm,
just the police were just on the factory grounds. I'm dropping off my friends. Now maybe I made a turn in there or didn't stop at the stop sign of the parking lot, which I'm guilty of for sure, not recognizing those as real stop signs. But like that started to put some fear in me. The I think mostly when I became Stephen's father, um, that I feared how he and I were being recognized in the world. And, you know, tall, young, well spoken Black child. Um, I, I guess I was kind of ignorant to feel fear at when I was the only white guy in a situation. There were some times where, you know, we would get into fights and I made us look soft by appearance, right? My Black friends had a white friend, and I was one, if not the only, maybe one of two white boys in, you know, the skating rink, in the church party, down in the inner city, in the, you know, whatever it was. Um, I would feel, you know, I was harassed at, you know, when I went to the inner city basketball games, midnight basketball league had started, things like
mhm.
that. You know, every now and then there would be somebody talking shit. You know, white boy this, the police are here, this, that, and the other. I never felt fear um, because I never, even at its worst, I never saw in the eyes of a Black man um, the willingness to harm me for no reason that I would see in white folks.
Let's 'cause I'm pretty sure we're going to come back to this one. Tell me about why you grew up in Philly and then you moved to St. Louis. Yeah. Tell me, do you have any memories of Philadelphia?
Now, the only memory of Philadelphia is cutting my hand open. I was 4 years old, cut my hand open, and my dad fainted in the in the hospital when they went to stick my hand. Here he is, supposed to be there to protect me. He's carried me all the way there. I feel safe, and my hand is open, and they go to put the needle in so that they could numb it up to stitch it up. And his ass was there. Now he's not. And my mother was 8 months pregnant. My mom was 8 months pregnant. She was in the hospital doing her internship, becoming a doctor in Temple University. And I remember being wheeled out next to him, and he's laid out. She comes waddling around the corner, and that is my really only memory. I have a slight memory of going to Maxine's house, who was my daycare, in-home daycare. She had an in-home daycare, and I remember getting my ass whooped for shitting in my pants instead of going to the bathroom during, because she told me don't get out of this bed until nap time is over. So okay, I won't get out of bed. I'd take a shit. I shit on myself and got my ass whooped and was like, okay, I can use my brain from now on. Yes, there are rules. There's also the exception to the rule.
So your parents moved from Philadelphia back to the St. Louis metropolitan area.
Yes, where they had grown up.
So was it specifically for you and your sister to grow up knowing and immersed in Black culture, or were there other factors as well? I would suspect that there were some other
It was
factors as well.
it, I don't to go back to St. Louis was to go back to where they were comfortable.
Oh,
To
home.
choose
Yeah.
University City was to be around Black folks. To be around Black folks was mainly to be not racist.
Right.
Um, and I just think that, like, literally, my mom. main interaction with Black people growing up was her housekeeper, maid, and the gardener, right? And she wrote this beautiful story. She was 16, she was 15 when her twin brother died in a, was hit by a car riding his bicycle. And my mom wrote this story as if she was 8 to 10 when it happened, but she was in high school writing this story about how her uh, father, all the people come over and they're crying and they're giving their condolences to the family, and her father watched the gardener, who had a beautiful relationship with his son who just died, come in the back door when all of his friends and really colleagues came in the front door. And the gardener, felt the pain of losing David uh, more than anybody who came in the front door. And it was at that moment, and my mom witnessed her father at that moment saying, "You never have to come in the back door again.
Mm.
You you felt the pain of being a part of this family more than they did. And I have you coming in the back door. I never want to have that happen again." And that, for her to witness it, had to be eye opening and jarring for her. And the relationship, because I know and am close with the family of my mom's maid, Augusta, the relationship that my mom and her sisters and brothers had with him, with Augusta, all the way until Augusta died into her 90s. And that family, we went there every holiday season. They either for a Thanksgiving or for a Christmas, we went to Augusta's. And I was raised with maids or housekeepers. We called them housekeepers. My dad hated the term maids, but they were family, and they were there to teach me how to. They weren't just there to serve me. They were there to show me how to wash the dishes, show me how to clean the room, show me how to do all these things. But they were family. They looked out for us. They came to our place for one of the holidays. We went to theirs for the holidays, and they lived in the inner city where ain't no white folks coming over for dinner to most of these houses. And so it was important. I know my dad, his mom was a stay-at-home housewife mom until her youngest child went to college, and that's when she went to college. So I'm not sure how he developed it, and I've asked him, and I still haven't gotten a clear answer as articulate as he usually is. But for whatever reason, justice was very important to him. Racial justice was important to him, and raising children that were not racist was the goal. What that meant for our experience, I don't think they had a clue or even had a reference base for having a clue, but it was certainly an intentional desire.
So a lot of times, so from Hollywood, bear with me. So we see the relationship between white person and the domestic, and it's only to a degree. Your
Mhm,
relationships, as you are describing them, and followed by the work that you are doing, have transcended that. It's not this
mhm,
is this was the housekeeper, and that's all I can see her to be. This is the gardener,
mhm,
and this is all I can see him to be. You transcend that
mhm.
and see the humanity. Can you tell me a moment or the first time that you were aware of their humanity beyond the things that they could do for you, that they were fully fleshed out three-dimensional people?
I think it was because of the holiday seasons, right? Like that is when everybody brings in your family and your friends. And so my mom's, even after my mom and her generation of siblings were raised, her parents had another woman who Augusta had helping them was named Evelyn, was their server. When we had family gatherings, they were in the family. And I think that's important for me to see, that that was the relationship. There was a time where, so the people that raised me the most, Nell was the woman that started off, but she got sick pretty early, and then her sister Lucille, and in between, and then Lucille's or Nell's, um, or their cousin or something like that. But there was Eunice, Lucille, Francis, and Francis and I were the closest, and Eunice kind of filled in, but we would go to Eunice's house on the weekends and on special holidays. Um, I think it was seeing them, being invited to more than just the domestic work, seeing them get the check, but they were involved in like the decisions on what to feed us. They were involved in, like when we get home, what do we need to be doing? It wasn't just my parents saying, this is what I want you to have them do. It was like I witnessed conversation where they were included in how is best to raise this child.
Mm.
And that was, I'm sure, different as well, from what you say we see in Hollywood, and how it was, these are the instructions, do this and go sit in your quarters and kind of thing. They were, um, they were inclusive in how we would do that.
Nice. Tell me more about, were there opportunities where you served them? You served your friends, your family. So it was not all one way where they were just constantly serving you. Were there opportunities where you served them as well?
There were times when we would go and help them if they were moving. Lucille had to move. There were times where she needed things done. Certainly, Francis would take me, and when I learned how to drive, Francis couldn't drive, so love Francis. But Shondo and I, when we would be afraid for our life at times, because she would be one of the women. She was one of those people that would come to a complete stop when she wanted to get over a lane on a busy street. And we were like, oh my God, yeah. So as soon as I could drive, Francis be like, I need you to take me to here. I need you to take me to here. I need you to take me to here. And, we would go out and get Reuben sandwich stuff, and she would come home and make the best Reubens. And, but she would ask, I mean, sometimes when she did drive, she would get out in the parking lot and be like, can you park the car? You're better at parking than me. Or, if she needed something heavier, I would help her put that stuff in the car. Maybe her grandson or son would be there to help her unload it. But yes, it was very much more inclusive in making sure that they also had a comfortable lifestyle or knew that they could call on us for help.
When you were around the dinner table, were you privy to the secret conversations? And when I say secret, when families get together, everybody talks. And you get to hear all the old stories. You get to hear political commentary. You get to hear the gossip. Were you privy to all of that too?
Yes and no.
Go ahead,
We
elaborate.
we will elaborate in our next episode.
Oh, no, no, no. I owe you a few minutes because of the glitch here. So hey, don't be getting all sassy and bashful now. You can't leave us
So
on a cliffhanger.
okay. So we were the gossip of my family, right?
Right?
My parents were the ones raising their children in a public school that was mostly black. What the fuck are you guys doing over there? I didn't know that they were being talked about that way until I had to put two and two together as I got older, right? I learned, sure, every family wants their children to get along and love one another.
Right.
I learned how to do that at my black friend's house, at Shondo and Mike's house. They had two younger brothers. They had cousins. I learned that all of us are family and brothers and sisters there. So my desire when I came home was that my two younger sisters loved and adored me for the reasons that I gave them, not just because they better because I'm a beat their ass because I'm older, but because I wanted them to feel loved and secured and taught and whatever I could to help look out for them, protection, whatever. That was a conscious choice of mine. My cousins would come in town, and it was consciously chosen to include them as well. My parents told me to, but their parents told them to, and they didn't do that with me often. So when family would speak to me, and they would speak to me about how well I behave, about in how much their children loved me. I was like, ain't that natural? And then I started to pay attention. And then I started to hear conversations about, oh, you could have gone to a better college if you would have gone to a better school in high school. My grandmother, I had to shut her up one day, and I don't mean to say that in a disrespectful way. But you could have gone to Harvard. You could have gone because my dad went to Harvard, and um, if you hadn't gone to University City High School, I think you could have gone to better schools. And I said, yeah, but isn't every problem that you complain about in this society created by those that went to Harvard and Yale and all the rest of them?
Oh,
Why not
oh,
there?
oh,
And right? And they had pitched me on it's not just the smarter teachers, it's the smarter students. So it's escalated, expeditiously, you know, at how much greater that education is. No, it's not. And then when I learned prestigious, ooh, that's what it is. It's just that,
mm.
right? It's
I think that's a great place to end this one because there's more questions, and I think we can have more stories or at least more conversation and dialogue about home because I've got more questions for you. Oh my
yeah,
goodness. So thanks for answering my question here. And I should have been smart and said, you know what? We can have a cliffhanger so that other folks can tune in. We may have to
that's
run
all
through
right.
that on
We got
editing.
we got plenty to discuss, that plenty
Oh,
to learn from, because I want to dig in with you as to how your friends and treated how your family treated your friends and how that dynamic and whatnot as well. So
oh,
we will get into all of these things in the next and later conversations.
can't wait. Can't wait. So, for you listening at home, this is Kory and JD getting ready to sign off on episode 2 of Same Difference. We'll see
Difference.
you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of Same Difference. We hope this journey through unique connections and diverse perspectives has left you with fresh insights and a broader understanding of the world we share.
We're humbled by your support and enthusiasm for the incredible stories and discussions we've shared. And remember, our mission is to foster critical thinking, embrace new perspectives, and spark conversations that bring us closer to an equitable world.
So, if you've enjoyed our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps us reach even more listeners.
And if you have a story to share or a topic you'd like us to explore, don't hesitate to get in touch. We're always looking for new voices and fresh perspectives to feature on Same Difference.
Until next time, remember that our shared humanity is our most powerful asset, and by working together, we can bring about positive change.
Stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep making a difference. Thank you for being a part of Same Difference.
Take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.